Good morning. I call to order the August 9th, 2022 State Land Board meeting. Good morning, everybody. And as you can see, I'm going to be chairing the meeting today in the governor's absence, and I'm joined by Treasurer Reed. So I'm going to turn it over to Director Walker for some opening comments.
Good morning. Thank you, Secretary Fagan and Treasurer Reed. Great to have you here, along with your assistants, Molly Loon, Ryan Mann, our esteemed counsel, Matt DeVore, and his assistant today, Destin. We're happy to have him here. I also want to let you all know that Bree Yednock is the reserve manager, and she is here as well. So we're very excited. We appreciate you standing in as chair this morning, Secretary Fagan. I know how much Governor Brand was looking forward to visiting South Slough. It was something she talked about for a while. And actually, the last time the land board has been at South Slough was in 2003. Wow. So it's a 19-year wait, and it won't be that long in the future, I hope. So sometimes the stars don't align, or rather the calendars, and U.S. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm is here in Oregon today. So while I know the governor was very much looking forward to visiting South Slough, she's also rightfully quite proud of our state's leadership on clean energy, and what an opportunity to share Oregon's work nationally. So that is why she's out today. Jason Miner, the governor's land board assistant, is in attendance on Zoom so that he can ensure the governor remains up to date on land board matters. I want to take a moment to acknowledge, do a land acknowledgement for the SNR, the South Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve. The South Slough Reserve is located on the traditional lands of the Mi'luk and Coos people, who have managed these lands for abundance since time immemorial. We recognize the continued connection of the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, the Coquel Indian Tribe, and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians to these lands and waters, and the tribes' ongoing stewardship of this important place. I got goosebumps because we really enjoyed working with the tribes here. It is a special place. So with that, I'm thrilled to welcome you to South Slough, where we are holding today's meeting. Nestled in Charleston on the South Coast, the South Slough is an incredible place for learning and exploration that's truly an Oregon treasure. I want to share a little bit more about this place so special to the community and to Oregonians at large. The South Slough Reserve is a protected natural area and center for coastal education, research, stewardship, and training. The reserve was designated in 1974, the year I graduated high school in Reedsport, so that's your history lesson of the day, as one of the first of 30 national estuarine research reserves around the nation. Today, South Slough Reserve manages and studies nearly 7,000 acres of natural area, including forests, salt marshes, mudflats, and channels of weaving waterways that I hope you all have a chance to explore while you're here. The reserve is an amazing resource for public recreation and education. Visitors can take advantage of numerous hiking trails, or they can kayak and canoe along lush waterways teeming with life. As long as they watch the tides, that's critically important. The Reserve Visitor Center is full of fascinating information about habitats and wildlife, local history, and ongoing research. Today, you can find 2 snake skins that were shed by the local resident snake here. There are also numerous summer camps, as well as school and community programs designed to connect adults, kids, and teachers to the estuary and coastal science. In the past 20 years, more than 75,000 students have come to South Slough to reserve to learn and play. A robust stewardship program helps maintain the quality of the reserve by managing threats to the ecosystem, like invasive species and trash, and implanting projects to restore habitats. Much of this work is accomplished in partnership with the tribes, government agencies, and other natural resource managers and organizations. The reserve also contributes to greater understanding of coastal systems through its research program. Some of this work includes using environmental DNA to map lampreys in Oregon's South Coast streams, as well as tracking the infamous European green crab numbers. The reserve also collects thousands of data points on estuarine conditions, many of which are shared with national databases to help track coastal changes over time. Finally, the reserve's coastal management program provides training and technical assistance to decision makers along Oregon's coastline. All of this is made possible by a dedicated team of staff and seasonal interns, as well as a robust group of volunteers. They have an incredible resource of volunteers here under the leadership of the reserve manager, Bree Yednock. During a recent evaluation of the reserve, the NOAA Office for Coastal Management commended Bree, saying she has, quote, forged a path and the means to grow the understanding of the South Slough ecological environment. That is just one of the many glowing accolades directed toward the reserve in this research evaluation, this recent evaluation. And I will be sharing that with you, I believe, in October, at our October meeting. The Department of State Lands manages the South Slough Reserve in partnership with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, otherwise known as NOAA. It's truly a remarkable collaboration that reflects shared federal and state commitments to protect and learn from our estuaries. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Smythe, the West Coast Director of NOAA's Office for Coastal Management, who has a few words to share with you today. Welcome.
Thank you, Director Walker. Good morning, Secretary.
Good morning, Secretary Fagan, Treasurer Reed, and staff board members. As Director Walker mentioned, I'm Rebecca Smythe, the West Coast Regional Director for NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. 50 years ago this year, Congress, recognizing the unique opportunities and challenges of managing where land, sea, and people meet our nation's coast, passed the Coastal Zone Management Act. And this established the partnership between NOAA, thank you for spelling out that acronym, and states around the country through our coastal management programs and through the National Estuarine Research Reserves. The reserve system was established to protect and study important estuaries around the country, important to the communities, but also to the nation. They also serve as platforms to educate our youth on the value and importance of estuaries to our environment, our economy, and of course, the community. 50 years later, as Director Walker mentioned, there are 30 of these around the nation, reserves from Hawaii to Maine, Alaska to Puerto Rico. South Slough is special among special places. It is the very first reserve dedicated in this system. So if you do the math, in 2024, we will be celebrating its 50th anniversary and hope that you will all be back, everyone, to celebrate on that special occasion. On behalf of NOAA, I would like to thank the State Lands Board, Secretary Fagan, Treasurer Reed, as well as Director Walker for your leadership in ensuring this partnership remains strong to tackle the challenges we're facing and take advantage of the opportunities. It really is partnerships that make this place work. As we tackle this work, I also want to thank Bree Yednock and her staff. It is truly a pleasure to work with them. They do the hard day-to-day work to make sure that their research, their education, their volunteers are all part of this place. And Director Walker did an amazing job mentioning this. And thanks to your leadership and support and their work, really South Slough and frankly, the Oregon coast is better positioned to take advantage of opportunities like the infrastructure law, hopefully get funding to the Oregon coast, and to really see the future that can be in this very special place. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you today in your time, and I look forward to spending the day at this very unique and beautiful place. I really forgot how beautiful it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Director Walker. I already wrote down the 50th anniversary, so I definitely hope we can be back. That sounds amazing. So with that, I want to move to the consent agenda. So Director Walker, you're up again.
All right, thank you. Secretary Fagan, Treasurer Reed, I did want to mention for our viewing public that we did remove the Klein Buttes matter from the agenda because the applicant withdrew his application. So that has been removed. All right, the consent agenda, the first item up is the request for approval of the minutes of the June 14, 2022 State Land Board meeting.
Madam Secretary, I move approval of the minutes from June 14th, 2022.
Can I second the motion? Is there any objection? Seeing none, the motion carries.
Thank you. All right, the next item on our agenda, you've seen these kinds of things before, bridge easements. This is a request for approval of a permanent easement of a bridge across the Canine River. Not Canine, but Canine in Township 7 North, Range 9 West, Clatsop County. The authorities are set out below. The Clatsop County is proposing to replace the existing Youngs River Road Bridge over the Canine River. The current bridge, which is located in an area that is designated as essential salmon habitat, is deteriorating. The county expects replacement will improve the health of the waterway and in-water habitat, decreasing turbidity, improving water flow, and reducing downstream erosion. And so the new bridge will be compliant with the new existing laws regarding fish passage. The bridge project requires a permanent easement for use on, over, under, or across the publicly owned waterway, as well as a removal fill permit for in-water work. Initially, the county applied for a removal fill permit in November of 2020. That application was circulated. ODFW provided comments regarding fish passage and in-water work and migrating fish. And that was all addressed through correspondence between the applicant and ODFW. As well as conditions included in the removal fill permit. So the DSL proprietary staff reviewed the application, determined the existing bridge did not have an easement, and that a permanent easement would be needed to allow the replacement. So per Oregon statutes, the easement typically requires circulation for public comment, but because we had already done that with the removal fill permit, that requirement was removed. DSL staff finds the replacement of the existing bridge is appropriate. County-owned bridges located outside of city limits are exempt from mandatory compensatory payments under the statute. Therefore, no compensatory payment is required. The recommendation of the department is that the State Land Board approve the issuance of a permanent easement to Clatsop County Public Works, easement number 63695-EA, to maintain and operate a bridge on, over, under, or across the Canine River. And your map and the easement are A and B in your appendices.
Thank you, Director Walker. Do I have a motion?
Madam Secretary, I move approval of the recommendation that the land board approve the issuance of the easement to Clatsop County as Director Walker has articulated.
I second the motion. Are there any objections? Any discussion? Seeing none, the motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 3. This is our informational item. And this is about abandoned and derelict vessels. And as you recall, last land board meeting in June, we had a very robust discussion about this. The governor asked if we could bring a report back at this meeting, and boy, howdy, did we do it. I have to tell you, it has been a lift to come together internally and understand how we would undertake this project. But I think we've done a fantastic job, and I'm interested in giving you an update, and then we'll launch into the plan. So I had intended to begin our progress report on the removal of the alert Saccharissa and Tiffany which Deputy Bill Ryan has nicknamed the SAT. So I got that. It should be Saccharissa Alert in Tiffany. But now we have an emergency removal situation in Astoria that we've alerted your offices to, but we do want to put this on the record. On Thursday, July 28th, the tourist, number 2, a former river ferry built in the 1920s, began sinking while moored to pilings near downtown Astoria. The vessel was visibly spilling fuel, which allowed the U.S. Coast Guard to step in to contain and remove pollutants from the water as well as from the vessel itself. And the Coast Guard pays for those activities. However, they don't pay for the removal of the boat. The Coast Guard was able to remove more than 500 gallons of fuel and oil by last Friday, with an absorbent boom remaining in place and regular monitoring as a safeguard. This vessel, unfortunately, is an imminent threat to public health and safety. It has severe hull damage, extensive dry rot, a fragile shell, and is located directly upstream from a fuel dock. It's also very close to the navigation channel, and given the vessel's proximity to the mouth of the Columbia and Riverside location, tides are likely to continue affecting its structural integrity. Not taking action to remove it from the water is certainly not an option for us. The department is proceeding with emergency removal, working with the same contractor who performed the pollutant removal. The vessel's extremely poor condition makes removal complex. After having evaluated the vessel during fuel removal, divers went down into the water to take a look. The contractor's current thinking is to crush the vessel in place, pull it from the water, and set it on a barge with barriers in place to catch floating debris. The timeline for removal is ASAP. We are coordinating with the contractor, the Coast Guard, DEQ, and local officials. We do not yet have a cost estimate, but the contractor's very rough estimate is at least $1.1 million. And the department will request general fund reimbursement from the emergency board as we put in our request for the Saccharissa Alert and Tiffany. And yes, indeed, we are going after the owner of this boat. This is another instance where the owner bought the boat, thinking of turning it into a museum and floating it and doing all kinds of great and wonderful things, and it never happened. It never came to pass. It does not have insurance like many of our other boats, and we'll get to that later, Treasurer Reed, in my update, because he did ask me about that. But this is a particularly compelling example of the risks posed by abandoned and derelict vessels, as well as the importance of taking action to remove vessels from our waterways. I'll talk through the department's 3-year removal plan shortly. First, an update on the Saccharissa Alert and Tiffany, the SAT. Since the land board in June directed the department to remove these vessels, we have done a number of things. Number 1, we expedited the procurement process for removal services. The department has secured delegated authority from the Department of Administrative Services, also known as DAS, to award up to $10 million for ADV removal. We are offering to increase the not to exceed amount of 8 existing price agreements with removal contractors to reflect this award authority. And indeed, I just signed an amendment to a contract this morning before our meeting. This was a critical first step in streamlining the procurement process and being able to more quickly remove vessels. I want to especially thank Deputy Jean Strait, our fiscal staff, and DAS for moving quickly and able to get this moving. We didn't think we could do it, and DAS was right with us and understood the need. 2, we have put a firm plan in place for removing the Saccharissa and Alert from the Columbia River. The department is entering into agreements with the U.S. Coast Guard, Metro, and DEQ, our partners in this removal, and anticipates raising and refloating to begin in September. It's an approximately 28-day process, which means the department needs to have a contractor standing by in late September for removal and deconstruction. Salvage and deconstruction will take several months as these are very large ships. They're not just boats, they're ships. 3, removal of the Tiffany is progressing. However, given staff capacity and the more urgent need to remove the Saccharissa and Alert due to partner availability and funding, removal of those vessels is happening first. 4, we are preparing to request general funds to cover removal for these 3 ships as well as the Tourist 2 at the September e-board. A request for a quote to remove the Tiffany will go out shortly. If we have contracts and price tags in place, we will be able to go to the e-board in September. If not, it'll be as soon as we have a full and accurate dollar amount. The department aims to have all 3 vessels removed from Oregon's waterways by the end of 22. That's an ambitious schedule, but that's our expectation. And the Tourist 2 should be removed within the next several days to 2 weeks, I anticipate. If you have any questions about this, Deputy Bill Ryan is here. I do want to thank my staff as we get into the plan because they've been tremendous. Malia Masiba is our legislative coordinator, and she will be leading these efforts. Allie Ryan Hansen and Leanne O'Neill have also been involved in the crafting of the language, and Bill and Jean on our staff, as well as the entire crew that participates in these removals, has been extremely helpful in getting us where we need to be. So unless you have any questions, I'll move into the plan. Questions?
Madam Chair, Director Walker, one thing you may be getting to it is as you go into the plan, you mentioned sort of the contingency or ambition to have things completed, but depending on availability of contractors and partners and so on. What can you say about that? I mean, I think you've mentioned before there's sort of limited universe of people and organizations that do this, but how do you sort of balance that versus the urgency we're all feeling to get this done? We need to go further and find people that we don't have existing relationships with, or what's the sort of dynamics in who can do it and who we know?
Okay, I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, Bill Ryan to come on up. We've had this conversation. I think we have the contractors. It is the space. It is the dry docks and things that are necessary to decommission. So Bill Ryan, Deputy for Operations.
Good morning. For the record, I'm Bill Ryan, Deputy Director of Operations here at DSL. Yes, the CAFI issue is a challenge. There we go. Oh,
Hello.
yeah. Hello. All right. So yeah, so capacity is a challenge. Both, DSL's staff capacity is one thing, but also just contractor capacity. We have price agreements with, I think it's 7 relatively local contractors, 7 or 8. That can actually do various aspects of the salvage activity of raising the vessel, cleaning them, and then disposing of them. But a real, and I think that's adequate for when we're dealing with 3-4 vessels at this point. We might look farther afield if we get the funding and basically authorization to do more vessels at a time. I don't know that we'll be ever doing more than 3 or 4 at a time. I mean, these are big undertakings, and we have to get access to the vessels, et cetera. But one major cost consideration is the lack of shipbreaking facilities. And so we are, in talking to our contractors and getting estimates, we're talking to some that are just saying, hey, we can store it on our upland facility for a while until we can figure out a way to get it broken and that sort of thing. You may recall that back when we did the global cleanup, that we actually had a temporary shipbreaking facility that was authorized by DEQ in Troutdale along the river there, the Sundial facility. And that is actually no longer authorized. It was a temporary authorization specifically for the vessels from that cleanup. And so that is something that could be a potential. Also, the Burgesson and Hayek Marine at North Tongue Point have some shipbreaking capacity, and they've recently received a Connect Oregon grant to buy a big ship lift that will allow them to lift more efficiently and much larger vessels than they currently are able to do to take onto their facility there. And so there is some capacity that can be expanded upon, a little bit of a chicken and the egg, I think, in terms of, entities wanting to make the investment to expand and get the permitting for their capacity, and making sure that the work is there to do as well. That being said, I think it's just a general recognition that there are a lot of these vessels out there, and so not necessarily just here in Oregon, and so that kind of I think that kind of capacity is coming.
Secretary, thanks for the answer. I hope you're hearing from us the continued urgency. So I recognize those challenges in that capacity, but the maximum extent we prefer put on the gas to try to get that done and explore all of those capacity adding possibilities.
Yeah, Treasurer Reed, very much get that and share that sense of urgency. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill.
Right, you just stay put. Thank you. We'll probably call on you again. All right, the memorandum is in your packet for members of the public. Let me just give the overview that we've heard before, but I need to reiterate that the people of Oregon, the great people of Oregon, own the beds and banks of all navigable and tidally influenced waterways throughout the state. On behalf of the State Land Board, the department manages Oregon's public waterways to ensure use for recreation, navigation, fishing, commerce, and more. Abandoned and derelict vessels seriously threaten the health and safety of those waterways by creating environmental and navigational hazards. Threats include water contamination, habitat degradation, public and private property damage, impacts on recreational, commercial use, and enjoyment of the waterways. So it is important that we remove them. For years, the department has been working with state, federal, and local partners to clean up and remove these vessels. The collaborative efforts have resulted in removing some from the waterway, but lack of a statewide abandoned and derelict vessel program with dedicated funding has created two major problems. Oregon school kids foot the bill for cleaning up abandoned and derelict vessels. Every dollar we spend on that aspect of the waterways takes money out of the classroom. Since 2017, the Common School Fund has expended $12.9 million removing commercial and recreational vehicles from public waterways. Hundreds of abandoned and derelict vessels currently need to be removed, but removal must be accompanied by comprehensive collaborative solutions to address perpetual risks. And removing that backlog is critical, as the secretary or as the treasurer pointed out just a moment ago. In 2018, Oregon joined the West Coast states and British Columbia in developing a white paper examining abandoned and derelict vessels issues, as well as a model blue ribbon program to effectively address those. See Appendix A for an overview of what that report provided to us. It's a foundation for us to begin our program, and it's been successful in Washington State particularly, so we will be drawing on a number of their efforts to rid their state waters. As the state of derelict vessels, at the State Land Board's direction, as you know, in June, the department has developed a 2023-25 policy option package, otherwise known as the POP, requesting $40 million in general funds. The requested resources will do the following: remove the abandoned and derelict vessels currently in Oregon waterways. The department will launch an initiative to accelerate removing those vessels in the next biennium. Though the department anticipates making significant progress, expending the entire requested amount in a single biennium is unlikely. The department is requesting funding be continuously appropriated so that remaining funds may be carried over to the next biennium and we can access those very quickly. Support department participation in collaborative efforts to address abandoned and derelict vessels long term. The department recognizes this is complex work, The importance of ongoing collaboration to identify problems, priorities, and solutions. Extensive discussion of this is likely in the coming months and during the legislative session. The department remains committed to working with our legislators, state and federal agencies, local governments, ports, partners, and the public to develop these long-term comprehensive solutions for addressing abandoned and derelict vessels. This 3-year plan that I will outline for you captures the department's work over the next year, as well as work planned with resources being requested for the 23-25 biennium. The department will provide the land board with regular updates, including presenting a detailed plan for 2024 following the conclusion of the 23 legislative session. And before I launch into the plan, I want to let you know, Secretary Fagan, that our staff, Malia Masiba, our legislative coordinator, did reach out to Oregon Education Association and Oregon School Boards Association, and both organizations will keenly be following this issue as the state budget progresses. They're willing to collaborate on messaging and doing their part to make sure that Oregon school children do not continue to pay for this mess.
Thank you.
I also had a brief conversation this morning with League of Women Voters representative who is here, and they are also very much supportive of this process as we go through the 23 legislature. So let me talk about phase 1 of our plan. This is from this month through July of 2023, which is the end of the session. It's engaging widely and updating cost and vessel information. So our first phase will build on expanding existing relationships and information, preparing the department to act quickly. This work includes continuing collaboration to remove vessels without cost to the Common School Fund. We will move forward on the 3 vessels that I mentioned, as well as the new one in Astoria. We'll engage partners and stakeholders widely. Those partners include the Oregon State Marine Board, the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, U.S. Coast Guard, local governments, ports, community organizations, waterway user groups, and businesses. These conversations will further shape and refine this resource request. Updating cost information and vessel list. The existing cost estimate of $39 million was developed largely with the Blue Ribbon Report's general formula for approximating removal costs. Cost estimates will be updated as possible using information gained during the removal of the Saccharissa Alert and Tiffany and the Tours 2. However, the department recognizes professional inspection of many of these commercial ADVs is needed to evaluate the condition, the contamination levels, the environmental and physical hazards, and other vessel-specific factors that affect removal costs so that we can prioritize the most dangerous vessels needing our quicker action. Additionally, Oregon does not have a comprehensive or current list of abandoned and derelict vessels. We work with our state and federal partners to track vessels of concern, inputting information into agencies and evaluating vessels for their potential threat, but we don't have a clear idea. So we will need to find a way to make sure that we can set up a system to do that. Due to changing conditions in vessel movement, as well as lack of an agency capacity, keeping that current list is extremely difficult. So we will learn to capture the extent of those and keep on them. Identifying priorities with our partners. The department will engage partners and stakeholders in an initial prioritization of vessels for removal when funding is approved. And we anticipate hiring a consultant with expertise in ADV removal to inform the prioritization process and further improve understanding of costs. The phased outcomes, we have outcomes for all of our phases, because what good is a phase or a program or a plan unless you have outcomes? Proposed outcomes would be removal of the 3 boats, now 4, updated cost information and vessel list, initial identification of ADV removal priorities, and the Oregon legislature providing resources and/or direction to address ADVs. Our second phase will come July 2023 to December. That's only a 6-month phase. Actually, that's 5. The phase overview, we will have the resources, we hope, from the legislature to launch our vessel removal initiative. Focus in this phase will quickly mobilize which vessels to remove. And in order to do all of that, we're going to hire staff. In our POP, we have clearly outlined what kind of staff we need and why. The department is requesting 5 new positions to support removal projects across the state for these ADVs. These positions include a manager to oversee the removal initiative and statewide collaboration, a natural resource specialist to provide technical expertise on vessel removal and act as a liaison to communities and contractors, a project manager to coordinate, track, and report on removals, a procurement specialist to manage delegated authority and ensure efficient procurement and contracting processes, and an office specialist to support administration of the removal initiative. Ideally, other state agencies involved in this work will be given their own appropriations to have at least one staff person or part of an FTE dedicated to work in coordination with our team, but because we cannot do it alone. The next step will be streamlining processes and developing a work plan. With new staff adding capacity and expertise, the department will design and implement a streamlined procurement process for ADV removal, including solicitation, contracting, and scheduling for collection, dismantling, and disposal. These are things that Deputy Ryan just spoke about. The department in July 2022 received that authority from DAS for the $10 million for the ADV removal. Increased capacity here is going to allow us to develop a work plan for priority removals, and the department will perform an in-depth assessment of additional commercial vessels and incorporate their removal into the work plan. Third, we'll explore ADV removal barriers. Working with our partners and others, the department anticipates exploring those known barriers to efficient and cost-effective removal of ADVs, including lack of disposal sites and absence of a statewide tracking system. Additionally, the department anticipates supporting efforts to develop a program during this phase, a statewide program through collaborative efforts. Phase outcomes for this 6-month phase: 5 new team members will be hired, streamline procurement process and work plan in place, and begin exploration of those removal barriers for ADVs. Phase 3, January 24 to June 2025, removing abandoned and derelict vessels. Work in the 3rd phase of this plan will focus on removing these vessels from Oregon's waterways using the processes and plans established in the previous phases to remove commercial vessels. There are 19 known commercial vessels of concern beyond the 3 we've talked about today and the 4th. The removal projects will be prioritized, as I indicated, with consideration of flexibility necessary to address emerging issues or opportunities. We'll also remove recreational vessels. There are an estimated 175 recreational ADVs in the Portland area, just in the Portland area. There's no statewide recreational ADV information currently available, and I can tell you that an ADV sank here at the South Slough, and that is one that we're trying to remove as well. I believe it was a sailboat. We're going.
Quick question there.
Yeah.
What's I can imagine the range of commercial abandoned derelict vessels being bigger than the recreational, but there might be some overlap, I'm guessing. How would you describe the differences between the two? We know more about commercial, but not, yeah, I see the handoff. That was smooth.
Yeah, I'm gonna let the expert answer that.
Thank you, Vicki. Actually, I am not sure what the official cutoff is, but basically but I'm sure it's in the Oregon Marine Board statutes because they have regulatory authority over recreational vessels. And so I'm sure that there's a definition there.
Surely, I'm less interested in the technical detail, but just in terms of if this is what we know about, how much does that generally suggest as to the scope of the bigger problem that we have less specific quantities about?
Yeah, and it's challenging because we know that there's a large number of these vessels in Portland, and that there are lesser numbers, but certainly in mostly it's a coastal area issue where you've got marinas and large water bodies for folks to recreate in and for these vessels to occur in. But part of the challenge of that is that a vessel has to be determined to be abandoned and derelict because it's been left in a place where it's not authorized or it's no longer functional. And so there are vessels that are kind of almost there or not. And so if a vessel is in a lawful moorage, let's say in a marina, or they have authorization from the department to be moored legally, then that's fine. Or if they're following the recreational rules, which allow you to moor in a place for up to 30 days on a recreational basis, then they're not considered abandoned and derelict. So it's really, it kind of gets on the list once the vessel has been identified as a problem. And then when we talk about recreational versus commercial, that really is a size and expense associated with the salvage of that vessel. The commercial vessels are they're larger. They tend to be steel hulled rather than fiberglass hulled. They tend to have more hazardous materials in them, that sort of thing. And they really are an order of magnitude or two more costly to deal with than say a sailboat, which would be considered a recreational vessel.
So if the estimate is 175 in Portland, does that mean there are 10 the rest of the state, or is it an equal number? Or I mean, I'm not asking for precision here, but just sort of order of magnitude.
I would guess that it's probably roughly the same amount, maybe a somewhat lesser amount. We don't hear as much about these issues than others, but we do know, like as Director Walker just mentioned, there was a sailboat that sunk recently here in the South Slough. We know in the Coos Bay area there have been other vessels that have sunken, and those get dealt with as they sort of occur for the most part. But yeah, so I'm guessing, but I would say maybe statewide, maybe twice that number. But that's really a guess.
Let me tell you that when you came out here today, you passed through Empire. And I'm a former resident of Reedsport, so I know this area very well. But when you come through Empire and make that left turn and head down Cape Arago Highway, there's a nice big boat, big ship sitting out there in the water. That's the El Conquistador. We've been fighting the owner of that one for 3 years now.
Yeah, more than that, probably.
We've cited them several times. They've now appealed. But prior to the El Conquistador sitting there, there was another ship that was there and sank. And I left my briefcase at home, unfortunately, so I can't tell you the name of that ship, but it sat there for a while and it sank, and we had to pay to pull that one up. So they're just all over the place. And you'll start noticing them very frequently. So back to removing our removal targets for the 23-25 biennium. We plan to set realistic targets. We're going to maintain our progress and with all due dispatch. The third phase also includes looking ahead to the work of the 25-27 biennium by developing removal plans for remaining ABB initiative dollars, as well as continued collaboration. I can tell you our phase outcomes for that particular phase. Our third phase is establishing and meeting removal targets, developing removal plans for remaining fund dollars, and identifying 25-27 legislative needs and priorities. I anticipate we'll have a large whiteboard at the office where we're going to list these boats, because there's nothing more that I like is to make a list and cross things off. And if I did something already, I actually put it on the list and crossed off just to make me feel good. And we are going to do that here. So that is our report, but I do want to go into responding to the questions that the treasurer raised with me during our meeting. The treasurer asked this at the June meeting as well. Can we do closures along the riverbank for both the Willamette and the Columbia instead of doing it 500 yards at a time? Per our Division 88 rules, OAR, Oregon Administrative Rules, 141-088, we can and have closed large swaths of riverbank and estuaries to overnight use and fires, ATV use, motor vehicle use, etc., depending upon the situation. The Sandy River is closed to all uses between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. from river mile 0 to 37.5. The Willamette River is closed to overnight use and fires in Eugene for a 6-mile stretch from river mile 178 to 184, and in Portland for 10 miles, river mile 1 to river mile 11. The rules are clear that, quote, restrictions or closures adopted by the state land board will be as limited in area, duration, and scope as necessary to address the identified need for the restriction or closure, end quote. That's in OAR 141-088-006 sub 3. For that reason, we generally tend to try to limit closures to the smallest area necessary or requested. But if the land board directs us to do a larger closure, we certainly can do so with associated rulemaking and public notice process and findings by the board as defined by OAR 141-088-006. I think there is enough documented evidence to warrant a broader closure. The closures have helped. We've noticed that, but lack of enforcement is probably our biggest challenge. As you learned regarding Lindbergh Beach partying at Swan Island and that I spoke about last month, and we have the same issue at Wheatland Bar. We have enforcement, but it's not all the time, and we can't manage it. We're not an enforcement agency, a law enforcement agency, so we rely on our partners. So, Mr. Treasurer, did that answer your question on that one?
It does. Thank you, Madam Secretary Director. I think it'll remain a question for us, because I understand the point of as small as necessary, but there is the question of sort of efficiency and scale, and if we're just moving people in one direction or another, is that really accomplishing the goal? So I imagine it'll come back to us, but that's helpful to have that background. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Your next question was, what are we doing to have a quicker response to ADVs? I think today in my presentation, you've heard that we were able to get the $10 million authority. We have entered into price agreements with 8 contractors. This eliminates one of the most time-consuming parts of the process, the procurement process. It would take forever to get a procurement in, and not because my staff wasn't working, but just because of the process. And by then you have a problem that's become an even bigger problem. And we're also building better relationships with local partners so people know how to inform us when there is an issue. The third question you asked is when does, and you had 5 questions. So the third question is, when does an ADV become a legacy vessel? That was an interesting topic to explore because we use the term for ADVs that are abandoned and derelict vessels that have been around for several years, but there is really no time frame or nor any other qualifier in rule or statute that defines a legacy vessel. So we just call those legacy vessels the ones that are out there for 3, 4, 5 years that are really a problem. I figure 2 years is pretty fresh, but you get beyond 2 years and we're talking legacy here. Your question number 4, did that answer your question? Okay. Question 4, can the land board write a letter to our delegation about the problem with GSA selling these old vessels for cheap? That was a great question. Per a conversation on August 3rd of this year between Malia Masiba and U.S. Coast Guard Incident Management Division Supervisor, the Coast Guard believes that program has been retired, but we are still working to confirm federally decommissioned vessels are no longer disposed of on the cheap. So I reached out to Alan Freemeyer, who we have on contract for the Elliott State Research Forest, and Alan is on it. He's contacting GSA, finding out who we need to talk to and what we need to do to make sure that program is no longer being used or there are other programs in its place. A letter from the land board to the Oregon delegation outlining the high cost of responding to these legacy vessels already in Oregon's ADV inventory would be a useful communication to the federal level. Should we continue to target federal funding to help address these outstanding costs? So that's an excellent question, and I think we've got some tools we're looking at. Okay, your last question. Insurance requirements for all vessels, particularly how do we solve insurance requirements for commercial vessels? And boy, this was a great question because insurance requirements do not lie within Oregon State Marine Board's jurisdiction or any other state agency. Insurance is not required in the state of Oregon. And as you know, when we were talking, your assistant Ryan Mann went on OSMB's website and recreational vehicles insurance is not required, but it's recommended. There is no recommendation for commercial vessel insurance, none. So when these things sink, well, guess what? A change in this state policy would require legislative action. A marine insurance specialist has been identified by the department as being helpful in protecting the state's risk and would likely be part of any long-term solution moving forward. The Blue Ribbon Commission report does address insurance, and it could be a start to a statewide conversation re-insurance related ADV issues. And the agenda item Appendix A gives you the overview. And they talk about insurance and they also talk about a vessel turn-in program. So I think that's really highly reasonable. I would guess that a number of these commercial vessel ventures won't be able to secure insurance because they're not in good shape. But if they don't have insurance, they shouldn't be allowed on Oregon waterways. Right. So excellent question, Mr. Treasurer, and I think we're on a path to see some action in the legislature. I think we just need a bill. We need a bill.
Director Walker, I have a question
Yes.
about, and if you don't know this today, that's fine. We can do an update at a later meeting, but do other states, I mean, is there precedent for other states with extensive waterways? Minnesota, I'm imagining, other states that have extensive waterways that have this requirement for insurance, not just a recommendation?
I don't know the answer to that. Mr. Ryan, do you know?
Yeah, Secretary Fagan, there are other states that have different regulations, and actually Washington State is pretty far ahead of us in terms of developing their program. And so that'd be the first place that we would look to see, also because vessels, basically go back and forth between. And so they do have basically greater resources dedicated to the issue, as well as regulatory system in place that is more robust than what we have. And one that I am familiar with, and this is from that Blue Ribbon panel report, is that they do have a requirement that if someone is going to sell a commercial vessel, that they actually maintain insurance on that vessel for, I think it's 2 years after that sale. So just in case basically it's to keep them from selling a vessel to someone who doesn't have the resources to maintain it, because that's really where a lot of these large commercial, and also with the recreational vessels, a vessel gets to the point where it's no longer operational, not functional on economic use, and so someone takes it to either live on it or to turn it into a museum or that sort of thing, but they just don't have the resources to maintain it. And so that kind of a statute requirement would be really helpful here in Oregon, at least to basically squeeze off that pipeline of new vessels becoming abandoned and derelict.
All right, any further questions about that topic?
Madam Secretary, Director, not so much a question, but a comment. I hope that we can use the momentum from that discovery to get towards a bill, whether it's in 23 or 24. That feels like a real opportunity, particularly with the additional information Director Mr. Ryan just added from Washington State. It seems like a real vulnerability there to address.
I agree with you, Mr. Treasurer, and we're on it. All three of us here are experienced at the legislative process. So we are on it. All right.
Director Walker, before we move on to the
Yeah.
action item 4, I just want to acknowledge that it was just 2 months ago that we asked you for all of this information, and this is just truly extraordinary work to have come back with such detail and such thoughtful review in just since June. So I just want to thank you and your staff. This is very, very extensive, a plan, like you said, with benchmarks and outcomes we expect at these different phases. This really is exactly what we asked for, and you gave it an extraordinarily quick turnaround, but didn't, shortcut it at all in the thoroughness. So very, very well done, and I appreciate this very much.
I got goosebumps. I always get goosebumps when I get excited. Thank you, Secretary Fagan. I appreciate that acknowledgement, because this was a heavy lift and we had many meetings, and sometimes we just have to start over because it was just hard to really focus. And Allie Ryan Hansen, our comms director, sort of helped us guide all of those ideas, which is why she's incredibly talented and on our staff, and I hope never leaves. Malia Masiba is also tremendous at her work on the legislative level, and I just don't want to leave anyone out. Just our entire staff has done a great job here. And now that we have a plan, and once we get the staff, I think we're going to be able to do really great things and do them well. So I'm pleased. Thank you. We'll move on to information or action item number 4. This is whether the State Land Board should appoint Dr. Corinna Nielsen to the Oregon Ocean Science Trust. The authorities are set out below. As you know, the Ocean Science Trust was created by the Oregon Legislature in 2013. Were either of you there during that time? Both of you were. I had left by then. And so that was Senate Bill 737. I had Senate Bill 737. Imagine how those get recycled. The duties of the trust are to promote peer-reviewed competitive research and monitoring that leads to increased knowledge and understanding of Oregon's ocean and coastal resources, promote innovative, collaborative, community-oriented, multi-institutional approaches to research and monitoring related to Oregon's ocean and coastal resources, enhance the state's capacity for peer-reviewed scientific ocean and coastal research, and finally, subject to available funding, which they actually finally got some good funding last session, establish and execute a competitive grant program to conduct research and monitoring. The trust submits that report to the Legislative Assembly each even-numbered year, and the trust outlines their activities for the year. The trust is comprised of 7 members, and the State Land Board appoints the trust 5 voting members, so it's an important task. The President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House appoint 1 non-voting member from each respective chamber, and voting members must be Oregon residents and have demonstrated a commitment and interest in the stewardship of Oregon's ocean and coastal resources. Voting members are appointed to 4-year terms, but serve at the pleasure of the Land Board. And before a voting term expires, the board shall appoint a successor, whose term begins on January 1 of the following year. And should a vacancy occur, the Land Board needs to make an appointment for an unexpired term, and that's what we have today. Dr. Nielsen is the Director of Oregon Sea Grant. The trust has recommended Dr. Nielsen to complete the unexpired term of Dr. Shelby Walker, the former Director of Oregon Sea Grant. She has lots of experience that you can see in her curriculum vitae, which is Appendix A. Dr. Nielsen previously served on the California Ocean Science Trust Board, a connection which will be beneficial in working across state lines for the betterment of ocean science on the Pacific coast. I don't know if Dr. Nielsen is on the Zoom call today. Oh, great. Well, we'll hear from her and then I'll make the recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for the consideration, Secretary Fagan and Treasurer Reed. and the entire land board. It would be my honor to serve on the Oregon Ocean Science Trust. As you can probably see from my resume and my CV, that I conducted my PhD research, started my career in marine science really at Oregon State University, and did field work along the full extent of the Oregon coast. It has been really important to me in my growth as a scientist, and my love for Oregon really has never left. And I'm really thrilled to be back and working to support Oregon coastal communities and marine science through my new position as the director of Oregon Sea Grant. So without any further remarks, thank you very much for considering my nomination.
Thank you, Secretary Fagan. I believe Laura Anderson, the chair of the OOS, is also on the screen. Did you have any comments, Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Director Walker. I think Dr. Nielsen's experience and commitment speaks for itself. So I would encourage you to pass her nomination. We are very much looking forward to getting her engaged in our current work.
Great, thank you. The department would recommend the State Land Board appoint Dr. Corinna Nielsen to complete the unexpired term on the Oregon Ocean Science Trust, effective immediately and ending December 31, 2023.
Madam Secretary, move to accept the recommendation and appoint Dr. Nielsen to the Oregon Ocean Science Trust.
And I second the motion. Any discussion or objection? Seeing none, congratulations, Dr. Nielsen. Thank you for being willing to serve in this capacity. Thanks, Dr. Walker. The motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 5. Whether the State Land Board should authorize the exchange of quitclaim deeds with William D. Pitcher's estate and adjacent landowners to clear title of former Willamette River Channel land and to establish state boundary ownership of the beds and banks of the river. And you can see the map on Appendix A. The authorities are set out below. And you've seen these kinds of cases before because the river has a way of changing over time. As you know, upon statehood, as I mentioned earlier, Oregon was granted the bed and banks of all navigable rivers to protect the public uses of navigation, commerce, fishing, and recreation on the state's rivers. When a river channel moves gradually over time through what they call natural accretion, the state's ownership generally moves with the waterway, but it leaves behind formerly submerged and submersible land with unclear title. So this proposed quitclaim deed exchange would clarify ownership for the state and private landowners on the Willamette River in Benton County at Township 14 South, Range 5 West, sections 23, 24, 25, and 26. The executor of the William D. Pitcher estate approached the department in November 2020, requesting the consideration to exchange formerly submerged and submersible land for what is today segments of the Willamette River. A review of the historical records, including historical maps and more modern aerial photos, shows the course of the Willamette River at this location shifted over time through natural accretion. Based on historical information, the state retains ownership of the bed and banks of the main channel of the Willamette River and a back channel known as Ingram Slough. The state does not have a claim of ownership to the former channels of the Willamette River that are now dry upland. It is recommended the exchange be to the ordinary high water line of the Willamette River and the Ingram Slough. The department recommends the State Land Board authorize an exchange of quitclaim deeds with William T. Pitcher Estate to establish the state's ownership of land below the ordinary high water line in the main channel of the Willamette River and in the Ingram Slough, and to remove the cloud of title for the William D. Pitcher Estate as to the formerly submerged and submersible lands from the former channel.
Madam Secretary, I move approval of the recommendation, the exchange of quitclaim deeds and removal of the cloud of title.
I second the motion. Is there any discussion? Is there any objection? Seeing none, the motion carries.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to item 6 for the Klamath Forest Lands decertification. You have heard about this one before. Now we're on it. Ready to make a motion, but the subject is today to request to decertify 4,907 acres of common school forest lands within the Klamath district. The authorities are set out below, and I want to explain why we're only asking to decertify part of it. For several decades, the Oregon Department of Forestry has ably managed and sustainably harvested Department of State Lands certified forest lands on behalf of the department. Approximately 33,005 acres of DSL lands are currently classified as certified forest lands, which means they're primarily suited for growing timber and other forest products. Timber harvests and other sales of forest products generate revenue for the school kids, for the Common School Fund. Annual revenue generated by certified forest lands is dependent upon the costs of management and quantity and value of harvested forest products. Certified forest lands cost about $40 per acre annually to manage. The financial performance is impacted by parcels that are not capable of producing reliable long-term timber revenue. Decertification of certified forest land parcels is one option that the department considers when costs of management begin to exceed long-term revenues. If forest lands are decertified, the department takes over land management, reducing overall costs of the forest, as overhead associated with the Department of Forestry's management of certified forest lands is no longer necessary. Approximately 21% of the department's certified forest lands are in the Klamath district. There are 2 large blocks of certified forest land in that district known as Sun Pass, and I believe it's Yannick's Butte. If I got that wrong, I apologize. See if maps and appendices A through D. And although the Klamath district has produced an average of 903,000 board feet of timber volume annually between 2010 and 2020, it now has the lowest return per board feet compared to other districts. Why is that? Well, ODF has been managing them well, but over the last 5 years, the Klamath district has produced less than $60,000 in annual revenue, while costing nearly $200,000 annually to manage. These costs include direct variable expenses for on-the-ground management and indirect fixed costs, such as service and supply, personnel services, and administrative prorate as identified by ODF. The budgeted 2022 fiscal year costs for management of DSL certified forest land in the Klamath district is $228,891 or 33.52 cents per acre. Revenues for these forest lands have been low. Why? Poor timber markets, low value species mix, and low volume per acre harvest. In addition to low productivity, these forest lands also have few near-term harvest opportunities. You could say the forest is near the end of its life cycle, but I'm not so sure, because if decertified, the department would take over management of these parcels, and we have a most excellent forester in the audience today, Ryan Singleton, on our staff. We hired Ryan in 2019 because we needed the internal capacity to manage our forest lands. These lands would fit into a larger portfolio of non-certified forest lands east of the Cascades managed by the department. And much of the future maintenance needs will be improving the forest health and fuels reduction thinning. The single fixed expense that won't go away, of course, upon this transfer is the rate of fire protection. This is currently sits at $3.86 per acre totaling $25,155 annually. And it's certainly subject to change with fire costs. And we all know about fire danger and costs here in Oregon and all along the West. The long-term management goal will be to reduce fuels and improve that forest health, as I mentioned, and we will continue to generate income from authorizations, including grazing leases. So currently, the Yonex Butte Tract is under a grazing lease and earning approximately $3,000 annually. So we're doing well there. The proposed transfer of management would take place in 2 separate decertification processes. This is how I'm going to tell you we're separating it. The first decertification would be effective July 1 of 2023, and it would total 4,907 acres. That'll be in your Appendix E. And the reason we are not doing that right away is because we have some upcoming timber harvest. It will also include Yonex Butte and some sections of the Sun Pass Tract. A portion of the Sun Pass Tract is scheduled for an upcoming harvest in 22 and 23. The remaining 1,920 acres of Sun Pass will be decertified at a later date, leaving them currently under ODF management. So you'll see this again when we get ready to decertify the last 1,920 acres. This decertification requires approval of this board and the Oregon Board of Forestry. The recommendation for the first decertification process is being submitted, of course, to our land board prior to ODF. So the department would recommend the state land board approve the decertification of 4,907 acres of common school forest lands within the Oregon Department of Forestry's Klamath District, as described in Appendix E, to be effective July 1, 2023. This decertification will include 3,164 acres of the Yonex Butte Tract and 1,743 acres of the Sun Pass Tract. Whew.
Madam Secretary, a couple of questions. Madam Director, I think I have a sort of rough understanding of this, of the answers to these two, thanks to Mr. Singleton, but I want to make sure I understand it correctly. So the word certify or decertify has some heft and some weight to it. As I'm reading here, it seems like that has a sort of limited application in this context. So I want to make sure I understand that right. If this is decertified, the practical implication is clear that DSL management is opposed to forestry. Is there anything else that's happening when that heavy word certify or decertify comes into play?
Introduce yourself.
Yeah, for the record, my name is Ryan Singleton, DSL Forester.
Our most excellent forester.
Yeah, so certification in this case is just simply a term that's used with ODF and DSL's relationship. So you've heard like I think it's Sustainable Forest Initiative, other words with sustainability and the word certified go together. That's not part of what this is. So we have this term certification, decertification, and it's just simply the relationship between DSL and ODF in terms of whether ODF manages them or whether they're under DSL management.
That's helpful. Thank you. So two other questions that are potentially unfair. But one is if this is the range or the potential benefit here is so clear in terms of cost, are we going to see this trend continue and pretty soon not have any certified lands with ODF?
Well, and probably not in the near term. I think there's other properties out there that are also low income producers that we may end up decertifying in the future. The ones that are under their management that are high revenue producers right now makes sense for ODF to manage it because they have efficiencies built in with those particular properties, most of those in the West Oregon district, as well as up in the Astoria district. But we will look for other opportunities to try to create more efficiencies in our forest land portfolio. And those will be other, at least in the near term, probably low income producing properties.
That's helpful. And the last one, ask you to comment on the Board of Forestry. They have to approve it too. How do they feel about this?
We had a meeting with Cal Makamoto, the director of ODF, and he doesn't foresee any problems here. This is a statutory requirement that we have to go through if we're going to decertify, and my understanding is they're fine. And they're going to put it on their consent agenda. So if it goes on the consent agenda, that means that bodes well.
Madam Secretary, I move approval of the recommendation and the approval of the decertification of the forest lands as described by the director.
And can you make sure I correctly said Yannick's Butte?
You got that correct.
Oh, sweet.
Yes.
Well, with that, I second the motion. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Seeing none, the motion carries.
I'll just stay here. All right, thank you. We have one other item, which is other, and it'll just take a few minutes. And the reason I asked Mr. Singleton to stay here is because he was instrumental in this next issue that I want to talk about. Not only you've heard about camp cleanups along the river, but we have camp cleanups elsewhere too. The Elliott State Forest that we hope to turn into a research forest up near Loon Lake, where I recreated many times as a high schooler. We had a big problem. We had a illegal camper that was there. How long, Ryan?
Oh, I think 3 or 4 months.
4 months. It's amazing how much trash was accumulated. So much trash that our contractors who manage the forest for us, Titan Kelly, took out several dump truck loads of trash and 4 vehicles were removed. Thankfully, the vehicles were on the Douglas County side of the Elliott because Douglas County doesn't charge for the removal of those vehicles. Coos County does. So we were able to keep our costs down there, but the costs were $11,417 to remove this stuff. And I have color pictures if you want to see it, but it's what you've seen before. What I want to say, and that was cleaned up July 12th. Thankfully, Ryan got on that and made that happen. This is just a vivid example of the impacts and costs of long-term camping and other unpermitted uses of school lands. Our challenge and that of other land managers is finding effective and long-lasting approaches to addressing these issues, which include homelessness, houselessness. As with our work on abandoned and derelict vessels, our success will depend on that broad collaboration and partnerships, working with communities for real solutions. The cost of this single cleanup was not insignificant. There are many other waterway problems and camp cleanup problems that are causing us serious problems. The department will continue to pursue other funding sources for this work, and we'll keep you updated. But another $11,417 has gone out the door. Thank you, Ryan, for your work on that. And Titan Kelly was just phenomenal getting in there.
Yes, they were. Yeah, Titan Kelly is our contractor on the Elliott State Forest. They do a wonderful job for us.
And that brings an end to this session of the land board, unless you have anything else.
Well, I will just quickly say, since Ryan is already up here, thank you so much. We had an amazing tour yesterday of the Elliott State Forest from DSL. It was Ryan and then also Jeff Huntington. And then we were also joined by Commissioner Krebs from the Coos County, and then also Keith Timchuk. And it was just, Cribbins, excuse me, Commissioner Cribbins. And it was phenomenal. It's one thing to see these things in a PowerPoint and on paper, but getting to be up there and smell the mint in the air, which we still couldn't figure out what that was. And we happened to bump into some Oregon State University folks that were up there and gave us a nice riparian waterways overview that was unexpected, but it was an absolute delight. I wish we could have spent 24 hours because I know there's more to show us and I want to come back. I know there was things you didn't get to show us. So, we want to come back, but just want to thank you. This guy is very, very knowledgeable, and I learned, but also accessible. Forestry is not something I've ever studied or learned, and I felt like I was able to follow along the whole way. In fact, I have my kids with me, and my son is 10, and I didn't bring them on this. They're with my aunt, but I thought I actually could have brought my son because he loves that kind of stuff, but he would have just, I mean, it was very accessible, but also incredibly in depth. So extraordinary work. Thank you for your time yesterday in giving us a really, really comprehensive of overview and tour of the Elliott.
I get to second that.
Yes, you second that. You're finally seconding the motion today.
Yeah, I would say, having played in the Elliott State Forest in my backyard, growing up in Reedsport, it takes you more than a day to see it all. Keith Timchuk and I went to school together. He's a little bit younger than me. But he's talked about it at length, and it really is a spectacular place. And I'm so tremendously honored to be working on this Elliott State Research Forest project that Treasurer Reed was your brainchild a long time ago, and we're making it happen. We're getting there, bumps along the way, but mostly blue sky ahead. I think we're very excited, and having Ryan here has made that effort really much more successful because he knows his stuff and he can call it when it's not being presented right because he knows his stuff. And we now have one of the former colleagues of his from the Warm Springs Reservation, Vernon
Wolf. Yes.
Wolf is now on our team, and he worked with you at Warm Springs.
Yes, he's a great addition to staff, so we're glad to have him on board.
Yeah, very exciting. So I'm glad you both got a chance to see what we all have been working on so long.
It was a taste. Definitely leaves you wanting more. Very cool. With that, I will adjourn the August 9th Land Board meeting.
Thank you.
Yay! Who is my
Canoe people.